Alan Yang produces the series, the Emmy-winning series Master of None, which is coming back for its third season. I'm Matt Noble of Gold Derby, here to ask you, Alan, we could talk about a lot of the things that are different about season 3 of Master of None. Let's start off by talking about, what do you think the biggest sort of similarity is, or the biggest constant is, with the series that's returned?
That's a very good question, because I think a lot of people would start with the converse, right? It's like, why is it all different? It's different tonally, different characters, different look, everything. The biggest thing for us, Aziz and I sort of talking about the show and the evolution of the show. I mean, this is a very simple way of putting it, but it's us, it's the creative auspices. It's our taste. It's our writing and direction and production. And, me and him putting our heads together, and then, of course, bringing Lena into the fold, especially because this season is so much of a showcase for her and her character. What's really in common is just, this is a story that really excited us, that felt like something very relevant and also different from what we've done in the past. I think if there's one commonality in all the seasons of Master of None, is we always wanted to find something that really excited us and really challenged us. And frankly, we kind of didn't want to do anything unless it scared us a little bit. And this certainly scared us a little bit. So there you go.
What scared you the most?
I mean, where to start? It kind of goes to that question, you kind of alluded to earlier, which is, how is it different? And in this case, for those of you not aware, we have a different lead character. This season focuses on Lena Waithe's Denise and her relationship with Naomi Ackie's Alicia. It also is a little bit different tonally. There's some of the joy that we saw in previous seasons, a little bit of comedy, but it definitely hews a little bit more dramatic. And this is a thing that some people I've talked to haven't even picked up on. If you don't necessarily work in the industry, or you're not on set a lot, you may not notice this, but we didn't move the camera all season. So there's a lot of wide shots, or what we call master shots, when we're shooting. And we shot on 16 millimeter film. We shot in London. We shot, there's so many things that are different about this season. So a lot of reasons to be scared. And by the way, kudos to our partners at Netflix and Universal for supporting us. And also thank you to everyone in the cast and crew for going along with us, because it is a very different season, and we're really proud of how it turned out.
Yeah. And what do you like, of all those sort of things, what was the sort of the most important choice you think you guys made for season 3 of the show?
I think centering it on this couple, it really was. And just deciding to make this season a very sober, very clear-eyed examination of a couple in and out of love. And, it's in the title, right? Moments of Love. Master of None presents Moments of Love is this season. And it was really kind of focusing in, once we kind of came up with the idea, Aziz called me, this was years ago. We talked about this idea starting season 2, and it was kind of percolating this whole time. We just really wanted to make sure we did these characters justice. And one of the things we talked about was, all of these classic movies from decades ago, and whether you're talking about Ingmar Bergman or Yasujiro Ozu, or movies that take these, sort of clear-eyed examinations of relationships and the level at which they're done. And of course, we would never compare ourselves to those guys. They're geniuses, but we hadn't seen those techniques, or those sort of that sort of level of storytelling applied to a very modern couple. In this case, it happens to be a queer Black couple in 2021. And what if you were, trying to do as deep a dive into this relationship as we've seen in couples in the past? And so that felt fresh to us, that felt modern to us. And then, of course, talking to Lena and bringing her into the mix, and talking to Naomi once she was cast, brought these whole other dimensions. And, again, it was really just doing justice to this relationship and the ups and downs therein.
Yeah. And what do you like, what was important for you in terms of like, I guess, messaging or like theme you want to hit on with love? Like, what were you wanting to say about love in Moments in Love? Yeah.
Oh man, that's a big question, man. That's a big question. I'd always err toward the side of letting people watch it because
Yeah.
you don't want my dumbass saying telling you what to think about love from the story. But it really to me was showing different perspectives, both sides. I think we have different episodes, some focus on each character, in her point of view. I think there's a recurring theme in a lot of the work that both of us do, and the work that I do on the side as well, and about the passage of time and the way we grow and change, and how that affects our relationships, both in love and family, friendship, all of those things. There's also some people were talking about season 1 and season 2. I talked to somebody who was saying season 1, it's a kind of about not knowing what you want. Season 2 is about wanting something but not being able to get it. And season 3, it's kind of certainly career sense. Denise has gotten what she thought she wanted, and yet it affects the rest of her life in not necessarily all positive ways. So, the effect of career success on love also was examined. And I think all those things reflect kind of where we are as people, and I think that's kind of applies to all three of us and what's happened to us in our lives.
Mm. And sort of as you mentioned, the sort of it's obviously centered on a relationship, the season 3, but it also like touches on other relationships where love's a key sort of component, from family and parenthood and friendships as well. Like, what relationship outside of the central one of the series did you find the most interesting in the season 3?
I mean, it's always wonderful when we get Angela Bassett to come in, and she's on the phone. It's a brief moment, but we always had that moment in mind because of the Thanksgiving episode and the meaningful relationship we established between the two of them. I think there's also really fascinating stuff with the friendship between Denise and Dev. Without spoiling too much, we just saw Dev as this very carefree, optimistic, sort of curious guy in the first 2 seasons, and to see what's happened to him and to see what can happen in relationships and friendships when, let's say, people's career paths diverge. I thought that was really interesting, and that's something Aziz and I talked about, and Lena and us talked about, how that affects your friendships and how you think something can be so solid, but over time and with the separation of career and distance, how that can affect things. So that was kind of very affecting for us, especially, of course, those characters being near and dear to our heart as well.
Yeah, I think in the first 2 seasons of the show, you really see like there's some real struggles and some real like heartbreak and things characters go through. But this like was in some ways like a much more sobering season in terms of relationships and in terms of characters. Like, it's not like, I don't know, it's not like, I'm going to go to Italy and make pasta now. I'm going to like, so what like, and I guess sort of in coming into these lives at these particular times, what do you think sort of that says the series about sort of just expectations and sort of maybe even humility in terms of where people sort of end up at different places?
I think humility is a great way of putting it, and it reflects a lot about getting older. Not to say that getting older is all about becoming more miserable or anything like that, but it's about if those first 2 seasons were about the optimism of being in your late 20s, early 30s, anything is possible. You're in New York, you're going on dates, it seems, again, and that's, an interesting time to write about, of course. But I also think it's interesting to think about how, you go look back at those early episodes or those early seasons, and you're like, man, this is really an Obama era show. This is like, man, like there was so much optimism. It's like, it's so much of an Obama era show that Obama himself watched the show and enjoyed it. So that's like a real, we got messages from old Barry about him watching it. So that and then you come to, of course, all of the difficulties that the country and the world has had over the past few years, and we wrote some of these episodes, like, again, it was pre-pandemic, all that stuff. It was all, these episodes have been in the works for a while, and then it was interesting to get on the phone with Netflix and Universal and tell them, look, we're in a difficult time right now, but it just so happens that we have this season that can be shot during COVID because it's mostly two people in a house talking. And on top of that happens to be a celebration of Black love, which also seems incredibly uncannily relevant. And they were like, wow, this is almost like a weird kismet fate moment where we should shoot this season. And it's a little bit more in tune with our times, as opposed to, two bozos going around eating tacos and going on dates, which, all due respect to those seasons, we love them, but that, it feels like, wow, that's not really what life is, certainly right now. So it was all kind of all those things happening together, and we didn't tailor this for the pandemic, and we didn't, these scripts were written before then, but it certainly seems reflective of the change in the character and the atmosphere of the country.
Obviously, like the first two seasons, and you've already alluded to this, like obviously the central character was Dev, and we saw like things from his perspective. We shift perspective for this season. I certainly guess what went into that decision for Dev to take a bit more of a backseat in terms of the perspective that we're seeing. And I guess sort of like just in addition to that, for Aziz to take less of a sort of central role in front of the camera and a more consistent role behind the camera as director.
Yeah, I think you got to give credit to a guy to be like, I want less screen time. Like, that's pretty rare. It's a combination of factors because, quite honestly, again, we had talked about this season 2, as early as season 2, even season 1. Honestly, there's an episode called Mornings, season 1, which is about Dev and Rachel and the mornings they spent together over the course of their relationship. And we literally talked season 1 about it'd be interesting to see Denise's mornings, right? And then, of course, season 2, we did the Thanksgiving episode, and that was mostly about Denise and her journey in growing up and with her family. And we did this episode called New York, I Love You, where we start with Dev, Denise, and Eric, and we just follow the lives of 3 totally different groups of people. And so, we had this interest in other characters and centering other people and not having it just be about this one kind of privileged single guy in New York. And so this seemed like a logical extension of that. And, we talked about this season being, could it be Dev and a woman, and it's about their relationship? And to us, it just consistently seemed more exciting to examine Denise and her relationship, and the fact that, what is it like when 2 queer Black women want to have a baby or don't want to have a baby, and what happens when they, when their careers intersect and collide and their desires sort of intersect and collide. And over time, it was just like, that's what was just more interesting and more fascinating to us. And on top of that, I think partially Aziz was like, I'm really into just directing these episodes, and I can do a better job if I'm not in front of the camera, because he was raving. We were on set in England, and he was like, I can direct the actors and don't have to run in and run out and watch playback. And like, I was terrible in that scene, but you're not focused on that. And certainly credit to him. We watched a lot of movies as research for this, and sort of figuring out the tone and the look and the feel of all that stuff. And so I think he was a lot more excited by that. And again, I'm really happy with the decision we made, because it's the interplay between Lena and Naomi in this season is something that you can't manufacture that. So I'm glad we made the decision we did.
Yeah. Did he still enjoy the couple of moments he got to pop on in?
It was really funny because he was on set acting. He's like, man, I haven't acted in a while. He's like, it's so weird to not be on. To be on set every day but not act. And then obviously when I was there, it was like, I could watch the takes and just give him notes right off the bat without watching playback. And we've known each other for so long. He doesn't care if I'm brutally honest with my notes. So I'm like, hey man, like you're a little bit too sad there. You're like, not sad enough. Like, it was like, that was kind of fun for him, I think, to jump in there and do that stuff. And I honestly think like there's this sweetness to those scenes, especially the later scenes in the season. Again, no spoilers, but where you see them kind of be friends again, and kind of it's a more mature friendship, and you think about what happens in life sometimes between friends who sort of drift apart or come back together, and vice versa.
Do you, since you did sort of try so many different things for this season of the series, what surprised you the most, or what was most unexpected in the result?
this is going to sound like just naked, unadulterated praise, but one of the pleasant surprises early on was just the steps forward Lena had taken as a performer. Because, when we all met years and years ago, season one, she was primarily a writer and producer behind the scenes. And, we loved her in the show, season one. And then, of course, season two, she took a step forward. But to carry an entire season and really be in every shot, be number one on the call sheet, the proof kind of was in the pudding when we did just some chemistry reads, just put her on tape, just herself, you're like, oh, the proof was there, right? There was a proof of concept. It was like, oh, you can do this, she can do this. We were ecstatic, and it was like then on top of that, I think secondarily was to us, putting Naomi on screen and centering her in a way that we hadn't necessarily seen so much in her body of work. Not to again, not to belittle anything she'd done before, but we were just so blown away with what she gave us, and especially her featured episode. I mean, it's difficult, and I was showing some of these episodes to my girlfriend who's an actress, and she was like, there's no hiding, right? There's no coverage in this season, and that's for those who are unfamiliar, coverage is kind of like, oh, it's a close up, and that means you can edit, you can stitch together different takes, you can put together, you can carve out a performance in some ways, but in this season, the scenes play out. So whether it's a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes, the camera is there. The actors just have to do it. They just have to do the whole scene. There's no flubbing. There's no, oh, I didn't react correctly. It's like it's in some way like a play. So, again, that's very effusive. But we're just really happy with. Look, there's no special effects. This ain't a Marvel movie. It's like this is two people just interacting, and we felt like they delivered something really fascinating and compelling. And so shout out to the two of them.
Did you learn anything from the series?
Yeah, I think we overcame our fear. One of the things we overcame was like, we didn't know if this would work in the sense that very early on, again, the whole, we're just going to shoot this in one take and never go in, never shoot any, like there's no medium shot. There's nothing, there's no protecting yourself. Yeah. There's no, you always am like, oh, when editing, we can patch it together. But this was like flying without a safety net. And so after about a week or two, we had our editors cut together some footage and to see if it worked, and we're like, oh, this isn't, in our opinions, incredibly boring, but yeah, so it was like, oh, this is not only not boring, it kind of makes you lean in, and it kind of makes you feel like you're a fly on the wall. And so it was intentional, and we'd always intended to shoot it this way, but there was always the idea that there was an emergency ripcord if it didn't work, if it was like watching paint dry, which hopefully it's not. But yeah, and it was like, oh, it's testament to the performance. And by the way, shout out to our production designer and our whole team developing the look of the show, Amy Williams, and our cinematographer, Themios, because I think the look of it also helps, because there's interesting colors, the sets are unbelievable, and you really feel like you're in that house. You feel like you're in that cabin in upstate New York.
This question comes more out of curiosity than desire necessarily, but no judgments on this, so don't take this the wrong way. Is there any do we imagine that Master of None will see more reiterations of this moving forward? Do we think it will go back to more similar than the first two seasons? Will we ever see Master of None again? What is I know no decisions may have been made, but what are your thoughts, Al?
We have some wild ideas. So we have some wild ideas. I don't want to spoil them yet, but yeah, I talked to Aziz about an hour ago, and we have some wild ideas. So, and we're talking to our pals over at Netflix and Universal, and so we do have some wild ideas. And look, certainly things we're interested in exploring, and we feel unbelievably fortunate to have this sort of, I don't want to call it a canvas because that sounds incredibly pretentious, but just a venue to make stuff, and to make stuff that is challenging and interesting to us. And as far as tone, like, we'll see. It's certainly anything's up for grabs. I think we have very sort of omnivorous interests, so yeah.
You won an Emmy for the first season of Master of None for writing the episode. Parents, we're an awards website, Gold Derby. We love our awards. And when you won, you encouraged Asian parents to get their kids cameras, or some Asian parents to get their kids cameras instead of violins. When did you sort of first pick up a camera? Or when were you sort of first decided that this was the path for you to go into filmmaking and storytelling?
By the way, no shade to violin playing Asians out there. It's totally fine to do that. Just in addition, we can do other stuff as well. We're really good at that. We're doing well. So music, perfectly valid. By the way, I actually did play violin and piano growing up. But again, I think one of the reasons I said that was for me personally, this didn't occur to me to be a job, right? Being a filmmaker, a writer, director, actor, none of that stuff was on my radar. Certainly where I grew up, my parents are immigrants. They weren't that kind. They just weren't sort of in the business of putting their kids into the arts. And so it really was a couple of things. I kind of just put my head down and worked hard in high school, and then I got to college and I was majoring biology, and I realized I had worked really hard in all these subjects and studied and all this stuff. And but do I actually like this stuff? And do I want to do it? And is this what I want to do as my future? I was working in a lab and in college. I was like, I don't think I love this. What else is there? So I started branching out. I did a few things. I did some more creative stuff. I started playing in a punk rock band and singing and I started writing as well. So I wrote for this comedy magazine in college. And I was like, man, no matter what job you're thinking about, this stuff is really fun, right? This stuff is really fun. I like who I'm around. I like these creative people. I like these funny people. And man, what if I could do a job and pursue a career that allowed me to do this stuff and be around these people? And ultimately, that's not a bad reason to go into a line of work. If you can pull it off, you can manage it, and it's something you really have a passion for, man, that's incredible. But I'm always a little bit jealous, by the way, of kids Steven Spielberg filmed his first movie when he was 3 years old. His dad gave him a Super 8 camera. I was like, damn, that's not me at all. And by the way, that applies to this generation of kids too. Because I look at my niece and nephew who are 7 and 3, and they're taking pictures and they're using phones to shoot little movies. It's I never thought of that when I was a kid. And maybe that means I wasn't a filmmaker like Spielberg is. Of course, that's true. But the earlier you get started, the better. And I felt like I was lucky enough to start doing it 17, 18, 19, that around that age, and start writing little sketches and stuff like that. And then as far as directing, it was really on Parks and Recreation, where I really liked being on set and was writing for that show and helping produce in some ways, and I got to direct that show. So that was a great start there.
Yeah. Well, Alan, thanks so much for talking with us today. People watching this interview can go to goldderby.com to make your own award predictions and to watch other interviews with award contenders. And Alan, all the best of luck for Master of None Season 3, Moments in Love, and particularly considering the upcoming Emmy Awards this year. All the best of luck there. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Matt.
No worries.